1981, a peaceful family vacation turned into a nightmare in the small town of Keddie, California. 4 people were brutally murdered in cabin 28, and the case remains unsolved to this day. But what really happened that night? And why does the cabin still haunt those who dare to visit? The Sharp family, Glenn, Sue, and their 3 children, were staying at the Keddie Resort, a quiet getaway nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The resort was a popular spot for families, with its rustic cabins and serene surroundings. Cabin 28, where the Sharps were staying, was a modest 2-bedroom structure with a living room, kitchen, and a small porch overlooking the woods. On the night of April 11, 1981, Sue's 14-year-old daughter Sheila was having a sleepover with her friend Dana Wingate, who was 17. The 2 girls were in the living room watching TV and chatting, while Sue, Glenn, and their 12-year-old son John were in the bedroom. The atmosphere was calm, the kind of quiet that only a remote mountain cabin can offer. Around midnight, the girls heard strange noises, footsteps creaking on the wooden floor, muffled voices, and the sound of furniture being moved. At first, they thought it was just the family moving around, but then the noises grew louder. Sheila peeked out of the living room and saw 2 men she didn't recognize. One of them had a knife. Terrified, the girls hid under a blanket, praying they wouldn't be seen. The men didn't enter the living room. Instead, they went to the bedroom. The girls heard screams, Sue's voice pleading, followed by the sound of a struggle, then silence. When the girls finally gathered the courage to look, they found the bedroom door closed. They fled the cabin and ran to a neighbor's house for help. The neighbor called the police, who arrived to find a gruesome scene. Sue, John, and Dana had been brutally murdered. Sue's body was found on the floor, bound and gagged with electrical tape. John's throat had been slit, and Dana had been stabbed multiple times. Glenn was missing, and his body wasn't found until years later, miles away in a remote area of the forest. Investigators found evidence of a struggle, including a bloody hammer and knife. The cabin was in disarray, with furniture overturned and blood spatter on the walls. But despite the violence, there were no signs of forced entry. It was as if the killers had been let in. Over the years, rumors swirled about possible suspects. Some pointed to a local handyman who had a history of violence. Others believed it was a group of teenagers who had been seen near the cabin that night. There were even whispers of a cover-up involving local law enforcement, as key evidence seemed to disappear. To this day, the Keddie cabin murders remain unsolved. The cabin was eventually demolished, but locals say the area is haunted. Visitors report hearing screams and seeing shadowy figures near the site. Some believe the killers are still out there, and the truth may never be known. The case is a chilling reminder that even in the most peaceful settings, evil can lurk just out of sight. In 1897, a remote cabin in the woods of Black River Falls, Wisconsin, became the site of a horrifying massacre. A family of 6 was found dead, their bodies arranged in a grotesque display. But who or what was responsible? And why does the land still carry a curse? The Johnson family lived in a small, isolated cabin deep in the woods of Black River Falls. They were known to be reclusive, rarely interacting with the nearby town. The father, Thomas Johnson, was a quiet man who kept to himself, while his wife, Mary, was said to be deeply superstitious. The couple had 4 children, ranging in age from 6 to 14. One day, a hunter named Samuel Hargrove stumbled upon the cabin while tracking a deer. He found the door ajar and called out, but there was no response. Inside, he discovered the bodies of the entire family, arranged in a circle around the dining table. The scene was horrifying. Each family member had been stabbed multiple times, and their faces were frozen in expressions of terror. The table was set for a meal, but the food was untouched. A single bloodied knife lay in the center of the table. Samuel ran to town to alert the authorities. When they arrived, they were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, and no footprints leading to or from the cabin. The family's dog was found dead in the yard, its throat slit. The only clue was a strange symbol carved into the cabin's door, a circle with a cross inside. Rumors spread quickly. Some blamed a local hermit named Ezekiel Blackwood, who was known to practice strange rituals in the woods. Others believed the family had been cursed by a Native American tribe whose land they had allegedly stolen. A few even suggested supernatural forces were at play, pointing to the eerie symbol on the door as evidence of a dark ritual. Despite an extensive investigation, no suspects were ever identified. The cabin was eventually abandoned, and the case faded into obscurity. But the land where the cabin stood became known as cursed. Locals avoided the area, claiming to hear screams and see shadowy figures moving through the trees. Today, the cabin is gone, but the land is said to be cursed. Visitors report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread when they approach the site. Some say the Johnson family's spirits still linger, trapped in the woods where they met their gruesome end. The Black River Falls Cabin Massacre remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in Wisconsin's history. In 1959, a group of experienced hikers vanished in the Ural Mountains. Their bodies were found weeks later, scattered in the snow with unexplained injuries. But what if their story began in a remote cabin, where they encountered something unimaginable? And why does the area still terrify those who venture near? The hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set out on a trek through the Ural Mountains in January 1959. The group consisted of 9 experienced hikers, all students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Their goal was to reach Otorten Mountain, a challenging but achievable objective for their skill level. On the first night, they stayed in a small, abandoned cabin deep in the woods. The cabin was old and decrepit, with broken windows and a door that wouldn't close properly. Despite its condition, it offered shelter from the freezing temperatures, which had already dropped to 30 degrees Celsius, 22 degrees. That night, something strange happened. The group heard noises outside, footsteps crunching in the snow, whispers, and the sound of something scratching at the walls. At first, they dismissed it as the wind or animals, but the noises grew louder, more insistent. Then they heard a voice, a low, guttural growl that didn't sound human. Panicked, the group decided to leave the cabin. They cut through the tent fabric and fled into the woods, leaving most of their supplies behind. The temperature was well below freezing, but they were too terrified to go back. Days later, search teams found the cabin empty. The hikers' belongings were still inside, including their journals. The last entry, written by Igor Dyatlov, read, "We are not alone. Something is out there. It's watching us." The hikers' bodies were found weeks later, scattered across the mountainside. Some had died from hypothermia, but others had unexplained injuries, crushed ribs, a missing tongue, and a fractured skull. One hiker's eyes were missing, and another's face was frozen in a look of sheer terror. Investigators were baffled. There were no signs of an animal attack, and the injuries were inconsistent with an avalanche. Some suggested the hikers had been attacked by a yeti or another unknown creature. Others believed they had stumbled upon a military testing site and been killed by a secret experiment. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most mysterious cases in history. The cabin was eventually destroyed, but locals say the area is haunted. They claim to hear the hikers' screams and see shadowy figures moving through the trees. Whatever the hikers encountered that night, it's still out there, waiting in the woods. The incident serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved.